I never heard him called an Asian either. But he was. And I'm very proud to have been his wife. It was a real privilege for me to do the work with him for the 54 years that we had together as man and wife, and the 4 years before where I chased him until he married me at 20. Today I want my sons to begin and end the program. I'd like to introduce Daniel Benjamin Winston, our youngest son, who's here with three of his family. And then I will give you a paradigm, an idea of what our goals are. This is Daniel. Tallest.
Thanks, Mom. Happy birthday. What a special, unusual confluence of circumstances to have a birthday on the Yort site at the same time. Mom Shminash, Erev Tov, and thank you all so much for coming. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, and it's so moving to actually be here. When my mother first spoke about this, I think it might have only been 4 or 5 weeks, 6 weeks ago. It seemed so distant, and I said, well, will this really happen? Maybe there'll just be 5 of us, and oh, that'll be okay. And to see all of you, all these wonderful Yidden here, with this wonderful panel, my mother, and the wonderful picture of my father accompanying us is really extremely moving, so thank you for coming. My mother concluded her invitation that she sent out on her email for the evening tonight with a statement, "Only with sovereignty will Israel have independence and security." And I think that it wouldn't be far-fetched to assume that the people in this room are likely to firmly agree with the statement and the sentiment that stands behind the statement. Father, Alav Shalom, worked tirelessly for as long as I can remember having memories to awaken the Jewish people and the Jewish state to the lack of and the need for and the means of attaining and preserving sovereignty, independence, and security. Every time I saw him, day and night, sickness or health, under any circumstance, he was always pouring out his mind and his soul onto endless reams of that ubiquitous yellow legal paper that covered every surface of our house since, again, as long as I can remember. He never stopped until just several weeks before he passed away in that same house, exactly 2 years ago. And the yellow paper still fills their house in Nevaseret while my mother is working on collating this with David into 15,000 articles that I've heard about so far. I think they're still finding more under the piles. And working on collating all of that into a website that's going to showcase and present what I can only say is his uncanny prescience in revealing and telling to us what was happening in Israel and in the Middle East at the time, what was going to happen, and in many circumstances what is still happening today. And really it's an ironic but fitting twist on the statement in Koheles and Ecclesiastes that there really is nothing new under the sun. And that the vast majority, in fact, of what he wrote about 40, over the past 40 years is as relevant to the issues that we are facing today as when he first put pen to all of that paper so long ago. I think we all have the sense that we are facing today the same failures of leadership and the lack of true sovereignty and independence that must necessarily follow in the wake of such failures, as we've been facing for the past decades, or even perhaps for the past century, or perhaps for even longer than that. Anyone who lived through the slaughter of the Levi, for instance, on the twin altars of appeasement and political narrow-mindedness, perhaps has been suffering a nauseatingly depressing sense of deja vu these past years as they watched a seemingly endless procession of our leaders making their way to the very same altars with ever larger and more debased sacrifices. I don't think anyone here doesn't know of what I speak. I think everyone here is familiar with exactly what I'm speaking. But I'd like to see if I can shine a slightly new light on this process of national innovation, as I call it, that we are sadly witness to on an almost daily basis to this very day. I am a marriage and family therapist, and my focus is on working with couples and sometimes training other psychologists and practitioners in the approach that I use that I learned from my mentor in the States. So I'm going to start with a question. Has anyone here ever been married? See a show of hands? Has anyone here noticed, whether you've been married or you haven't been married, that married couples can sometimes do crazy things independently and to each other. Have you seen that? Crazy things? Yeah? Yeah, good. So now there are many approaches to therapy that's going to take all that crazy stuff that we all know about, and they're either going to pathologize it, or at the very least assume that something is going wrong. Right? Something's wrong. These people need help. They're in trouble. Now the starting point of my approach in therapy is that everything that's happening is making sense. Everything makes sense. People are coming in, nothing's going wrong. Couples can come in assuming and thinking that they're the bride and groom from a Japanese monster movie gone bad. And the first thing that I'm interested in trying to understand is why the Gehenna that they're going through actually makes perfect sense. So the next question to the audience, you're going to see the connection. This sounds a little crazy. What does this have to do with the subject of tonight? I'm going to get there just now. So how many people here think that canceling the Levi was sort of a strange, perhaps even crazy thing to do? Yeah, okay. I see we're going to have a unanimous vote on every one of my questions, I can tell. It's a sold audience. Very easy. How about destroying Jewish communities in order to prove to a hypocritical and hostile world that we love peace? How about that? Is that kind of, let's see, yeah, do you like that one? How about the maintenance of open fire orders that are more concerned about making us look better, or at least look less bad, in the UN and on CNN, than they are about protecting the lives of Jews in Israel, or about maintaining both the dignity and deterrent effect of our soldiers? Is that also on our list? We can have unanimous show? Almost? I think so. How many of us actually recognize that the things that most of us, maybe all of us, see as pretty crazy actually make perfect sense? Perfect sense. To whom and why? That's a good question. Let me explain that why some of the examples, which are really, you all know, the tip of the iceberg, necessarily and logically follow from our ongoing national identity crisis, which finds its most dangerous expression in our would-be leaders. The crazy things that we just talked about, and as I said, they're just a small selection of the huge panoply that's out there, are really symptoms of an underlying misconception of self and nation that has plagued us since the very dawn of our people. The Creator of the whole universe has told us that He created us to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. We are supposed to be a light unto the nations. We're supposed to be on a trajectory for greatness. That's our destiny. And yet, despite many glorious manifestations of this in our history is also replete with self-doubt, what I call fear-based mission drift, and what is known in family therapy as failure to launch. All of that comes to expression in our modus operandi vis-a-vis our own land and vis-a-vis the nations around us who are either seeking to divest us of parts of those lands, of our land, or simply just to destroy us, Hester Sullivan. Now, rather than strive to figure out what our interests are and to act from the resulting necessary conclusions, as every other sane nation in the world would do, we, I'm not speaking about the we in this room, but the we in the royal we sense as the leaders of our nation, occupy ourselves with trying to figure out which of our interests can be sacrificed in the name of pseudo-interests such as fake peace, lip service diplomacy, looking good, buying time, etc., and etc. The list goes on. And once we are guided by such pseudo-self-interest, we can't help but do crazy things like the few that I just mentioned. So while the behavior makes sense in the context from which it springs, it's really more crazy than anything the Mad Hatter could have come up with on his own. And sane people like us in this room, we don't like when we are forced to be associated with crazy behavior, even if it makes so-called sense. And therein lies the frustration. So now what do? How do we move ourselves from a place from which we can accept the weighty responsibility that comes with being a head and not a tail, as the Pasuk says in Parshas Kisavo? Unitancha Hashem l'rosh v'lo l'zanav, Hashem will make you into a head and not into a tail. How do we avoid the promised Palestinian catastrophe that follows in the wake of our ongoing identity crises as described in Ha'azinu? They provoked me with a non-God, angered me with their vanities, so I shall provoke them with a non-people, and with a vile nation will I anger them. So I think these are good questions, and despite my own personal choices, far be it from me to know the answer for anybody or anybody. But I do think that we can see in the Tanakh as the record of our own unfolding national identity and mission, a call to resolve the very same national identity crisis which continues to plague us since our very beginnings in the desert. The same identity crisis which continues to give us leaders who so often fail to distinguish between self-interest and self-destruction. At the end of the day, David HaMelech, who's the ultimate standard in Jewish sovereignty that we're supposed to aspire to, teaches us that the outcome is truly in our hands. As he says in Tehillim, Hashem shomrecha, Hashem tzilcha, ayad yaminecha. Hashem guards over you, Hashem is your shadow on your right hand. And the Baal Shem Tov teaches us that just as a shadow follows the object from which it emanates, Hashem places himself in the position, as it were, of following us as our shadow. We have but to choose life in all of its God-given expressions, and he will go along with us and respond in kind. But such a choice can only really be made by the people of that nation, and by the nation itself as a whole, who are clear about who they are, why they are here, and just what we need to do in order to fulfill our ultimate destiny. We were up today this morning at Har HaZeisim by my father's kever, and I just wanted to finish off with the quote that's on his matzeva as a message to us all, because I really think that when we chose it, it was from an understanding that it really expressed, I think, not only his life and his dedication to Klal Yisrael and his work for Klal Yisrael over so many years, but also some of what I said just now, which really stems from being my father's son. It's a pasuk in Yeshayahu 62. Leman Tzion lo ech Hashem, uleman Yerushalayim lo eshkot, ad yetzeh chanoga tzidka, v'yeshuata k'lapid yiv'ar. For Zion's sake I will not hold my peace, and for Jerusalem's sake I will not rest, until her triumph go forth as brightness, and her salvation as a burning torch. Thank you very much.